Okay, we're going to talk about Cell's original timeline here in about less than 60 seconds. We know what really happened, right? It was essentially the butterfly effect of Future Trunks traveling and warning about the androids that created that whole thing, right? Okay, we know that there's chaos and darkness and destruction in between. We pretty much know that. What happens if Gohan actually doesn't defeat Cell? What happens actually if Cell is able to, per se, absorb Android 18 way before the hyperbolic time chamber moment happens, even for the Saiyans to start training to prepare for Cell? What if he is way ahead of the curve in the time from what we actually saw in the anime and the manga? In your opinion, how drastically different do the events on the ground change? Does Cell maintain a new attitude, and does he dispose of the Z Fighters quickly, or does he still give them time because he wants to challenge? I've seen some people say Cell was always going to be doomed because that need to fight the perfect the perfect fighter to test his ultimate power, to be the perfect fighting machine, that was never going to go away. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. So I'm trying to be better about this if you're actually a subscriber or a supporter of this channel. So forgive me, please, and give me time. But this is continuation of part 1 of our Cell's original timeline. How things would have been different, at least in my opinion, had he actually absorbed 18 way before the Z Fighters had a chance to even have a fighting chance, more or less. This part 2 will be the continuation, essentially, of, okay, Perfect Cell does all this. What happens? Does he give the Z Fighters time, or does he not give them time and he disposes them? I think a Perfect Cell that's actually just bent on complete chaos and destruction, he doesn't give them time. He immediately goes to the hyperbolic time chamber, or at least to Kami's lookout, like Super Buu did, right, during the Majin Buu saga. I would see that being the exact way that would play out, which is almost a parallel of what actually ended up playing out in that saga as we described it later in the Buu arc. I would have seen Perfect Cell doing the same thing, and I think that's the difference between Perfect Cell and Super Buu as villains. That Super just bet chaos destruction, like that is what he was created for. Perfect Cell's purpose really was to be the ultimate fighting machine, to destroy Son Goku, and to what? I mean, just be untouched in the like, you know what I mean? Dr. Gero is a crazy dude, okay? I don't think there was really any limit with Cell, but the point really was for going after Goku, okay? All the androids were for going after Goku. In fact, most of them have been for going after Goku since its creation. That's why that backstory of the Red Ribbon Army is so funny in context. So I think Perfect Cell, in this context, if he has a Super Buu-like mentality, he goes straight up to Kami's lookout. He just blows the whole thing up, and then there's no one left to stand in his way, and Earth is left to obviously suffer very miserably. That's just my thoughts. Feel free to let me know yours. There will be a part 3 for this coming as well. Welcome back to part 3 of our Cell's original timeline, and if it actually changed and he had actually absorbed 18 way before the Z Fighters had a chance to defend. Well, here in part 3, Cell has essentially gone to Kami's lookout. He's blown up the whole thing. In that scenario, to me, that's the end of it. Who else would have been able to come to the Z Fighters' aid, to Earth's aid, and stop Perfect Cell on his rampage, as he would have already absorbed all of his ultimate power, everything he needed. His mindset would not have been to let the Z Fighters and Goku, have a chance actually to fight him. He just would have blown the whole thing up from the get. Broly, for what we know, is still on planet Vampa. Why would he have been involved? You know what I mean? That would have taken intervention from Whis or Beerus or someone of that level to change the situation. No one on the ground at that time, had they been at the hyperbolic time chamber in the case of the Saiyans, and they had not survived or at least been trapped, that's more or less the same thing, right? We saw how that turned out and what was necessary. Like that's a mess, right? So yeah, unless Whis decides to intervene, I don't see a scenario where Cell doesn't go untouched and the Earth doesn't obviously get destroyed at some point. And because he would be able to essentially survive in any vacuum in space, because he has Frieza cells in there as well. So, like, he can go anywhere to any planet and just continue to do the same thing until he actually meets someone of equal power. That, I think, would be the scariest scenario of Cell. Essentially, if you want to compare it to what Kid Buu's design was, and maybe that could have been the inspiration, obviously, considering the time in between Perfect Cell Saga and the actual Buu Saga. There could have been some insight. I don't know if that's confirmed or not in regards to maybe the inspiration behind Kid Buu being that thing where Earth wasn't going to be the stop. He was just going to he was just going to blow up as many planets as he could in the entire universe. Perfect Cell could have essentially been on the same trajectory had that been his mindset. I think that's essentially where it ends there. But for part 4, we're going to talk about an opposite side of Cell not doing that actually. Stick around. Okay, welcome back to part 4 of our Cell's original timeline changed in 2 different ways. We handled the worst case scenario because I don't think that one ends well at all, obviously. This is the scenario where it's different because instead of Gohan, Goku, Vegeta, and Trunks going into the hyperbolic time chamber with the knowledge he had only absorbed 17 at the time, which remember, that was the case. He was still semi-perfect. He wasn't at his ultimate form. Had he already absorbed Android 18 before those Saiyans, before those dudes stepped in that time chamber, their mindsets would have been completely different, man. That changes the energy and the tone of that arc literally upside down. Because with the mindset that, okay, he's already perfect Cell from the start, okay, there's literally the battle psychology involved in how they train, the urgency in what's required for their strikes, their moves, their combinations, everything is higher stakes there. Even more extreme tensity is a non-negotiable because when you're facing a perfect Cell from the start, you don't have an option just to do what Goku and Gohan did. Goku could have went harder than he did. He spent time in there to train his son because he knew Gohan's rage and energy would be what was necessary to defeat Cell. And turns out Goku gambled and he was right. You understand what I'm saying? So with the knowledge that 18 was already absorbed and Perfect Cell was already perfect and not semi-perfect, Vegeta and Trunks are also doing... I don't even know what they're doing. Like, that's probably... In fact, that's probably going to be part 5, and that is a point I just thought of in the moment that was not even going to be there prior to my original part 5. Because Vegeta and Trunks, I think, already had the more extreme training session of the 2. It's not even close. I mean, Trunks talked about it, and Vegeta, like it was nothing, you know what I mean? But essentially they had reached their limits. They would have done something different knowing Perfect Cell had absorbed 18 already. Now, Vegeta's arrogance still would have obviously been a big issue. I think Trunks still would have taken a different approach, whether he was following Vegeta all the way through or whether he decided to take his own journey, halfway through whatever is halfway point in the time chamber. The mindset, the game changes, boys. It doesn't stay the same knowing Cell absorbed 18 and he's perfect and his strength can be felt and okay, like anything short of what he has means instant death. They wouldn't even waste their time, right? So give me your thoughts, comment section below. Part 5, part 6 coming up. Well, I hope you're certainly not tired of this series yet. I think this is a really interesting topic, and I'm hoping that this is going well enough conversationally. But part 5 here, we're going straight into Trunks and Vegeta's mindset, knowing Cell has absorbed Android 18 in this particular story, in this timeline, in this alternate timeline that could have happened. This is not just placebo. This isn't just fairy dust magic. This literally could have happened if he would have found Android 18 in time knowing, okay? Like, in this case, Cell absorbs her. Vegeta and Trunks go into the time chamber. It was already the more intense of the 2 sessions, as I said in, part 4. But that's just the bare minimum. What does Vegeta do differently? How does he prep Trunks? Does he prep Trunks? Does he push Trunks to the brink of actual, death? And I think they gave us hints that their training sessions got to that point, and that's natural, I think, for Saiyan training. You don't even overreact to that. But to the point where it's like, okay, Vegeta could have killed Trunks in the time chamber, feeling the extent of the threat if he had actually respected the power of Perfect Cell once he absorbed 18. If you're operating with the mindset that Vegeta would have still acted arrogantly and not taken Cell seriously, even knowing he had absorbed 18. We saw what happened on the battlefield, but that was on the battlefield. We're talking about a timeline where these guys are about to enter the time chamber, and then it's confirmation it's happened. It's like, okay, you're about to step into this place basically virtually for a year where you get this extra training. What's your mindset now, knowing that the threat level has risen to the highest it could be and that you can't do anything less than that to make a difference? I think that's a big deal, man. I think that's a really big deal. And I think Vegeta's mindset is more of a Trunks, if you die in here, you die in here. I don't know that Vegeta actually had that thought in the actual context of what happened and what we've grown up watching in the anime and reading the manga. But I think knowing the threat level would have risen, I think Vegeta would have had it be that, right? Trunks, if you die in here, if he dies, he dies. I genuinely think that would have been his mindset, which also would have put more pressure on future Trunks. Also, kind of raising his strength. I think it would have made those two way stronger, regardless of whether Vegeta took Perfect Cell super serious or just enough to know that, okay, the threat level had risen. Give me your thoughts. Part 6 coming up. Part 6, Cell's original timeline, turn for the better or for the worse. We did the worst case scenario in the first 3 or 4 parts. We're now doing the better case scenario. Well, not technically yes and no. Let's see. Goku's mindset. We're going to talk about knowing that Cell had only absorbed 17, he's calm, he's analytical, and he's confident, right? He sees it as a way to push himself and Gohan beyond Perfect Cell. I talked about that in the last short. He's optimistic, but he's realistic. He knows there's a limited window. Now, the difference changes when he knows Cell has already absorbed 18. Goku's stress levels would spike. He would be calm outwardly, but internally he would know that they were training for a fight against Perfect Cell with a much narrow margin for error. There's more pressure to accelerate Gohan's training. Most importantly, he might take more extreme risks to even push Gohan harder because Cell is exponentially more dangerous. It's not that much different from what I talked about in the last part with Vegeta and Trunks. I think Vegeta would be willing to have Trunks be a casualty because at that point he would see it as, well, if you can't contribute or if you can't survive, you're not going to make a difference anyways. And we know that's how Vegeta was operating at that time. Goku is still going to have empathy for his son, but only to a certain extent before, you know what I mean? Like, I see that same thing playing out, but just not in as much of a extreme way maybe as a Vegeta Trunks situation would. There could be inner conflict though as well. Goku would be asking himself, do I train Gohan to win or do I risk breaking Gohan by pushing him beyond his limits? There could be that kind of extreme side of Goku. I don't think it would happen in this scenario, but that's something you have to think about. That's a lot of stress and pressure to think about when the threat level, again, I am going to keep repeating that phrase because that's what's essential here. Semi-perfect Cell and a perfect Cell are two different fighters, two different levels of strength, two different levels of something that you have to account for, right? Vegeta's mindset, of course, was absorbed with wanting to surpass Goku. 18 absorbed, I talk about it. There could be internal tension. Arrogance might clash. We discussed that in the last part. Trunks, we discussed him. And with Gohan, again, I think most importantly, his fear and his responsibility would actually push him further. So it could result in even more awakening of his power or hesitation in his training because of the fear. Gohan, would almost be acting in paralysis, okay? That's happened. We've seen that happen in Dragon Ball. It's nothing new. That could be the downside. And that would potentially be more dangerous if Gohan wasn't able to act on those emotions we saw in the actual manga and the anime. So let me know your thoughts. We'll be wrapping this up in part 7. So if you made it all the way through, man, you might be someone I can count on. Or at least hopefully you found this interesting, which both in the same that works for me. We've gotten to this point now where it's like the threat level has risen. It's been changed. 18 has been absorbed by Cell. Goku and Gohan go through completely different training than what they had previously gone through. And Vegeta and Trunks also go through near-death training. All of this elevates the Saiyans that we know of to higher power levels than we watched during the anime and or reading in the manga. It has been elevated because, again, the significance of what is what is required of them to defeat and fight Perfect Cell raises the bar that much. What happens after they come out of the hyperbolic time chamber? Perfect Cell is just sitting there waiting. Is he doing anything? Is he training? No, probably not. It's probably just waiting. What now happens? Is there a difference? Does Goku start the fight? Does Vegeta start the fight? Does Trunks get out there? Does Gohan get out there? Is there a difference in how the fighters actually approach fighting Perfect Cell? Does Cell give them a chance? You know what I mean? Are they able to finish their training? Do they finish it? And if they do, what's the difference? Stronger Saiyans is always a plus. Is it enough to make a difference? Do they fight together? Remember, Whis has always said if the Saiyans would just fight together, if they all fought as one, and not as a fusion, but together at the same time against Perfect Cell, they have a chance of beating him and winning, right? That's obvious. So give me your thoughts. Let me know how you felt about this entire story in the series. We'll be looking to do more going forward. It's Kaioken Striker here.